So we've reached session 8, and this is the final video session. Today I'm going to start by talking about the last chapter, chapter 10 in the textbook, Panagu and his stance. It's on multimodal literacies and discussion-based teaching. It's an interesting chapter. It has some political overtones, and I think when I read the chapter I was reminded of something my supervisor told me when I did my doctorate, that there are many ways of being wrong about a topic or subject, but there are many ways of being right, not just one way. And I think that's kind of an interesting to think about, that there's many ways of being right and many different approaches and many different pathways to follow when you're experiencing learning or teaching, and not just one right way of doing things. And I think that can be a challenge for some teachers. As we go into designing new learning environments and looking at progressive ideas and 21st century skills, there are things that the authors in this chapter talk about that are challenges. One is gaining knowledge of students' lived experiences and making their work in your classroom relevant to things that happen to them outside of the school. A lot of their learning is completely separate, or has been. There's lived experience learning outside it, and there's classroom experience, and often they're not integrated at all. And so I think one of these ideas is to make students' experiences relevant, and that's something that John Keller pointed out in his ARCS model, which is gaining their attention, making things relevant, building confidence, and gaining satisfaction. There's another issue, which is the flexibility of teachers' authority and role. So it gets to this issue of being a guide on the side rather than a sage on the stage. The teacher doesn't have to know everything. They might be learning from their students and learning in a kind of collective learning opportunity with their students. So teachers can scaffold and build things, but generally they're part of the learning as well. The third area that's a challenge is multimodal literacies, understanding what those are. There's a term that I learned in grad school called logocentrism, that there's the primacy of the word, especially the written word. We tend to think of literacy, and it does describe being literate, knowing how to write, knowing how to read. But when they talk about multimodal literacies, it's examining texts in a way that, well, examining films as if they were text, or examining videos and television and audio, all these other forms, art, examining them as if they were literary forms. And in many ways we have terms like visual literacy, computer literacy. So it's designing narratives other than written text, and that's something that's sort of a challenge to some teachers, I think. And then the final one is awareness of political, social ideas and discussion techniques. This is sort of something that's really quite interesting, and there's a term they used in this chapter. I think it was called backfire effects, where you attempt to change someone's ideas or their opinions, and you give them very interesting information that should cause some dissonance in the way they think. But what it actually does is it just affirms their original viewpoint. And especially just recently, in the last few years, we've heard this term fake news. Anything that disagrees, that doesn't align with your opinions, you can just say it's fake news. I don't have to listen to you. So it's a really challenging time to be a teacher, and a challenging time to be in the world in terms of sociology and politics. I won't get into the political angles, but there really is some things that can happen in schools that can be very challenging for teachers when you start discussing social issues and politics. So those are things to think about, and things I gained from this chapter. One interesting term that I took away from this chapter was this word dislocation, that the predominant languages, predominant cultures, and the predominant ways that teachers interact in the classroom will be dislocated. And there's a democratization of things that go on in schools and in learning environments, that we have a regard for other languages. All languages carry an undertone or overtone of political text. There's no neutrality in language. And when we uncover this and start approaching the classroom, it does alter the way we go about our teaching, and teachers' roles change. And these ideas might be challenging for some teachers who have just the whole tradition of teaching is that the teacher has to be the sage on the stage and have all the answers. So those are things that are going to change. I'm going to leave that chapter. I wanted to talk a bit about some things we missed doing last week, which one was one type of robot called the Sphero. I'll just do that now. I've just started up the Sphero robot. They're just a, a sphere, a plastic sphere, and inside they're quite an ingenious technology. Really, there's a weighted motor inside that moves around, and as the weight moves around, it turns the sphere. So it'll track around a room. It will do all sorts of things. Another interesting aspect: new spheros can float in water, and they'll actually move in water too. And I'll show you a little. I'll give you a little lesson plan that involves using a Sphero to do that. I can adjust the color of it. I can make it move and adjust the speed. They're quite fun to play with. And I think actually, if I was purchasing a set of robots for a class right now, I'd probably purchase the Spheros. There's other things you can get for them. There's versions that look like Star Wars characters and things like that. But children really like to play with them. They're lots of fun. You can have them follow you around the room and things like that. I'm just going to show you the app, and you can't operate them off your computer. You need the Sphero app that's downloadable on your cell phone or your iPad or tablet. I'll just show you that now. So I'm going into QuickTime Player to get my cell phone screen to come up, and it should just come up right now. And there it is on the screen. And I'm just going to click on the Edu app, which is right here. And open it up, and I'm going to tap on the robot and to connect it, and it's connecting, and the robot turns blue, and it's now connected, and I can go and it brings up a page where I can aim it just to make sure that it's going in the right direction, and then I can change the colors of it and control the speed. I have it on very, very slow at the moment, and I'm just aiming it there. Blue light is supposed to face me, okay. And then I can actually control its motion, and I can make it roll around a little bit and things like that. To actually go in and code, there's, let's see, programs. And if I want to make a new one, we can go in and create a program type, and it's very much like a Scratch. You can have it roll, you can have it spin, you can put in a stop function. The lights, you can have them change and control it that way. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. I think we'll just leave it now, but just it's easy to use, it's a lot of fun, and you just need a cell phone and to download the app, and it is very, very much like a Scratch drag and drop visual programming language. We're now in session 8 on Canvas, and this session we're going to look at transcurricular approaches like STEAM, and then talk a bit about the maker movement and making. One thing that I wanted to include is right down here. It's called Campus Quest, and it's a link to a lesson that I made quite a few years ago, but I probably should have talked about it last week because it pertains to outdoor learning and place-based learning, learning in the environment. This was a web quest that was developed, and web quests were developed by a fellow named Bernie Dodge at San Diego State University, originally designed to make sure children just didn't wander around indiscriminately on the web looking at all sorts of different things. So the teacher could set up specific sites a student could go to. Web quests generally, they resolve real-world problems, and students perform in teams and they collaborate. This one was about, I think I was inspired to do it because there was a lot of construction going on at UBC Okanagan campus, and there was a lot of natural sites being eliminated and parking lots put in place. So I thought it would be interesting if students could, I'm just going to enlarge this a bit if I can, if students could form teams to go out and do what I referred to as bio-inventories. So take a space about the size of a classroom outdoors where there might have been some disruption, or there was some just regular kind of indigenous species, flora and fauna, and go out and determine what sort of species are there. Then if there's a need to replant species, they could replant indigenous species. And I happen to know there was a nursery in Lake Country that just, their living was going to sites where the government had built roads or turnpikes or whatever, and they would go in and put in Oregon grape and the kind of indigenous species that would have been there before. So this was an opportunity for students to work on this as a team. I asked students to make a name for their team that had something to do with the outdoors, and then they could be different roles that team members could play as photographers, biologists, they could look up the sites, field researchers, audio technicians doing sound, and illustrators. And I gave them the opportunity, if they didn't want to photograph, they could draw pictures. Another student suggested they write a poem about their site, so that was another aspect that kind of made this into a STEAM function. So they had to show a photo of the site, list the species observed, and then find the species in these resources. The whole idea was to make a website about their site and about their space, and they could go to these eFlora BC, eFauna BC, the BC Tree Book, and Book on Birds, and find out what species were in that particular area. So I'm just going to leave that with you. You might want to make something similar for your school grounds or your neighborhood. I just thought it's something I was kind of proud of. I liked it, and it covered all the different areas and disciplines. There was language arts involved, computer technology involved, biology, science. There might have been having to do some math to measure off the size of the space. And if you did poetry and art and illustration, it really brought together all sorts of different ideas. So that's there for your as a resource for you. The second is an article about STEAM education, just what it is, and there's a nice infographic about it, what the research says, STEM versus STEAM. This is an infographic, Design Challenge, Understanding STEM versus STEAM, or STEAM versus STEM. And it's from an American institution for the arts and integration and STEAM. It has a very strong arts focus. I should also say that a lot of this I've covered in, and if you took the STEAM course from me last year, I've covered it in that, and it might be repetitive for you. I'm showing everybody because I don't think the STEAM course will be taught for another couple of years. Next year I'm teaching a course on technology and leadership. So if people haven't taken the STEAM course, they'll likely not take it unless your program gets drawn out into 3 or 4 years. So I just wanted to share some of the things with you. This is a little overview I did of STEAM, and I think I'm just going to put it on present mode, and I think it just sort of presents some different ideas about what STEAM actually is, different conceptions of it. It grew out of STEM, this notion that we need to do more science, technology, engineering, math in schools because, basically it's an American idea and America's falling behind. Everyone's leading in science and math and technology. So Americans and Canadians decided, let's do more STEM. Additionally, there's some very, a lot of issues about young girls, young women in STEM areas. There's not that many of them, and different cultural representations in STEM as well. So it's something we can enhance more participation by disadvantaged groups in STEM, and STEAM might be a good way into that for them. So STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And what do we actually mean by that? Well, what are the arts and what specific disciplines? This is by a chart by a professor named Georgette Yackman, who's a math educator, and her idea is it's a lot of STEAM can be built around math ideas, and if you get into arts people, a lot of STEAM can be built around arts ideas. So it's different things to different people. Now, what types of visual arts? Well, basically all types. Sculpting, painting, film, photography, fashion design, graphic design, other related art forms. Dance can be in there too. Just about anything that can be considered a fine art could be considered in STEAM, but maybe other art forms as well. There's 7 liberal arts in classic antiquity, and a lot of these are actually covered in STEAM already, or in STEM, arithmetic, geometry, and astronomy or science areas. And then on campus, there's 4 modern liberal arts or natural sciences, social sciences, arts, and humanities. So that kind of covers everything. So when you start opening this door to STEAM, what exactly are you including and what are you excluding? And I sort of tend to think that maybe we don't need to exclude anything. I had a professor once, it was an ed tech course I took, and he was talking about when you learn something, there's often other things that come with it. So he gave this description of a starfish. When he reached into the ocean and brought up a starfish, there were always other things attached to it. There's seaweed and barnacles and plankton, all sorts of things come with it. And if you decide to study a topic, say medieval castles, there's going to be all sorts of information that comes along that just isn't about castles. It might be about a feudal system. It might be about the Crusades. There's all sorts of things that come up with just castles. There might be mathematics and moats and things, all sorts of things can arrive. So studying any kind of topic, you'll be bringing up other information, and that's sort of an approach I like to think about STEAM. When you're solving a problem or doing project-based learning, you're going to be bringing up lots of other information, and it all gets connected together. And it might be regarded as one big mess, but it might be one big area of really interesting and engaging knowledge for students to learn. STEAM variations, there's something called STEAM that has activism in it, and that's where you get into making sure STEAM and STEM support disadvantaged groups, and it gives them opportunities to learn and to participate in STEM and STEAM knowledge. STREAM, where there's research, and it's included as sort of a research component, a strong research component in STREAM. Another one is called HEAT. I actually have only heard one person talk about this, and I've never really been able to find out much information about it, but it's humanities, engineering, art, and technology. And there's something called STEAMX, which is actually it's actually used in some of the schools in BC. It's an academy for STEAM, 2-year accelerated program for highly motivated academic students. There's the business of STEAM, so lots of people, lots of companies now are selling STEAM resources. Now, some of them are pre-made packages of things you just build and use in your STEAM class. It's STEAM in a box. It's sort of canned STEAM. You just get all these ready to teach programs, ready to build, tailor-made for primary schools. But in one sense, it kind of contradicts the ideas of making things yourself out of recycled materials, which leads us into kind of the maker movement, maker spaces. And one thing children and adults, because I've done maker things with graduate students as well, people love making things in maker spaces, with getting all sorts of materials and putting together in unique and creative ways. It's a lot of fun, and students do learn a great deal with these opportunities. And I did give you that article last week about maker spaces. There's 3 descriptions of STEAM I pulled out of the literature. One, it's a K-12 initiative conceived to bridge interdisciplinarity, creativity, innovation found in both arts and science, calls for integration of the arts into a well-rounded curriculum. Number 2, it's an educational approach to learning that uses science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math as access points for guiding students, inquiry, dialogue, and critical thinking. And this is the one I like. Effective STEAM teaching should position teachers to create problem-solving scenarios, foregrounding the problems, not the disciplines, but the problems for students to solve using creative and collaborative skills that encompass various disciplines. That basically throws the discipline-based kind of thing out the window. You're just solving problems, and you're using whatever disciplines or whatever resources or whatever knowledge you need to solve the problems. So that's sort of the one I think is the starfish one. You're pulling things up, and you're just bringing in all sorts of areas. You might end up doing ESL with STEAM. You might be doing history, social studies, sociology, anthropology. All these things can come up in a STEAM project. Just one final site that I put on Canvas for today. Oops, I'm just going to get rid of the hamburger. And this is the Sphero Watercraft lesson plan, and it's a lesson plan. And I've just left it for you up there, and you might want to use it in your class. It's just 3 pages. It's a design, thinking, and maker activity, and it's using a Sphero robot as a motor to transport a craft that you make using maker materials, to transport 20 pennies across a body of water. It might be a children's swimming pool. If you have a big sink in your classroom, you can use that. We did it last year in the STEAM class, and a number of people were quite interested in it. So I've just left that there for you. And maybe you'll be able to use that in your classroom as a maker activity. It's a lot of fun. I'm just going to leave it there today. There's going to be, I'll just announce this, but I'll send an email out as well. This Wednesday at 4:30, I'll do another Zoom session if anyone wants to talk to me about their final projects. The projects are due in a couple of weeks. I think it's actually maybe 3 weeks. It's after the spring break. And if you have any questions or any issues about that, just email me. Otherwise, I will have a Zoom session this Wednesday to talk about that too. It's optional, but if people want to attend and have questions or have a discussion, just I'll send you out an invite. So that's it for today, and that'll be the last video session for the course. And again, if you have any questions or issues, please just email me. Thanks so much.